Welcome to Spartan Up Podcast. We're here in Boston today, and we're going to talk about an interview that Joe did with Mindy Hamilton, Senior Vice President of Global Partnerships with Marvel Studios.
You know, I was in a restaurant years ago, 20 years ago, with a guy who owned Marvel, was having a really tough time. Stock was way down. I would have never guessed, I don't know if you would have, that it got to a place where it is today.
No, I mean, as we grew up, we're kids. You read the comic
comics.
books. You know, how could you have thought that?
Yeah, and so she's going to give away some...
Somebody did, though.
Somebody did. She's going to give away some interesting foresight into what's coming in the future.
Cool. Where it's going. Awesome.
Thanks, Superhero Joe and Colonel Nye.
I'm
Sephra.
And you know what? Actually, I just want to mention too with this interview some really interesting stuff about Marvel, about her. But it's really worth staying right to the end because some great stuff comes up in that conversation.
We are here in LA with Mindy Hamilton from Marvel. You're like the most senior executive at Marvel. You're it.
I love you for that. Nope, not so much. I have a lot of energy, but I oversee partnerships for film, television, and digital.
So explain that. Well, who would Marvel do a partnership with?
Oh my gosh, who wouldn't we do a partnership with? Let's see. Everything from brands to social platforms. For example, it can be with other media properties at times, but mostly we're brand facing. So the concept is anybody who wants to work with Marvel on any of our IP, whether it's doing comics, like a custom comic, or straight up ads, film partnerships, or TV partnerships, or in our digital first content initiatives, the idea is that through my team, it's one-stop shopping, right? So you're not being bounced around across a corporation, really.
So like a network might want to do a television show on one of your characters.
So that will be left to the greater minds of Dan Buckley, who is our president. Dan Buckley and his team and Jeff Loeb are coming up with the concepts, and then they sell it, whether it's to Netflix.
It doesn't go in reverse. It doesn't. Typically, a distributor doesn't say, "Hey, we really." You're creating the concept and then pushing it out?
I think people, now that we have dipped our toe in the water, especially where TV is concerned, there are networks that are coming and knocking on the door.
Owned by Disney?
We are owned by Disney.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. It's about 4 years ago, I think it is. I've only been with the company a little over 2, but it's what Disney has allowed because of their network and it's like everything from infrastructure as well as from an external perspective really helped us from a lifestyle perspective because it's giving us places to amplify, for instance, in the parks. Right? So
you have actual
We do. We
rides.
actually just opened up, I haven't gone on it yet. I heard people are losing their minds for it. A new Guardians ride out here in Anaheim, actually.
And that's the reason Disney has just expanded, as Mickey Mouse just isn't as big as he was at one point. Is that
Actually, Mickey Mouse is doing quite well, as is Minnie.
All right.
There's some pretty cool
Goofy
things, actually.
what?
I can't speak to Goofy.
Right.
I am not indoctrinated enough to be able to speak to that.
But the new generation doesn't. Those aren't the cartoons. They're necessarily, or the characters.
I think with Disney Junior and with XD, for you and I, they might not be top of mind, but you would be surprised. Disney is that trusted brand with parents, and so they feel safe exposing their kids, whether it's at the park or on TV or on digital platforms, to expose them to that content, and they don't have to worry about it.
That's something I never considered, and this is a crazy story. So, we're all about grit and resilience and just being better humans. I had this silly idea. We have 4 children that our kids would not watch any TV in English. They were going to watch it all in Mandarin so that they would learn Mandarin over time. And my wife went along with it. And later on, we found out that there was some weird cartoons and things that they were watching. So trusted is important.
And so I think it's across the board, right? Whether it's Pixar or Lucas for Star Wars, and now Marvel. They very smartly acquired properties where they know people have a trust factor. They know what to expect. There's a high bar of creativity. And they knew that these would become lifestyle brands, which they have.
How many characters are in your portfolio?
Over 8,000.
8,000 characters.
Yes.
So we haven't even scratched the surface.
We're literally, what you've seen is probably on my pinky at this point. Yeah.
And the plan is just...
And don't ask me to repeat all of them.
No, just start rolling them out.
I don't even
though?
know if I could clock in 100. I'd try, but yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think people are stunned, especially as we keep introducing them. You know, if you didn't come in the door through publishing, if you're not a comic fan, and you know, most people where it's scaled came in the door for film. And then obviously the TV and now games. So they're getting exposed to new characters there and really new universes. And the beautiful part is the whole universe is connected, right? That's the beauty of Marvel. Any of these characters could show up at any given time.
So I'm not a comic guy. Is that true? Like, so from the old comics, they were all interconnected and the stories...
That is the whole premise of the MCU is that it's a connected universe. You know, even though... You know, like for instance with Guardians, you know, Guardians is a whole nother, you know, off in space, out in the galaxy. You've got Avengers that are here on the ground. You know, eventually they're going to meet up, you know, in Avengers in the next film. So, which we're really excited about.
Don't give it away.
That's okay. That one actually came out. I thought about it. You saw me pause for a second, and I went, no, even though they're holding my child outside for ransom in case I do say something wrong, but yeah, we're good.
Got it. All right. So one of the big things with this podcast is we want to find out for the folks watching and listening, how can we become more successful in life? Whether, you know, mom, mechanic, monk, not just necessarily monetarily more successful. You rose to the top of your field. You're running the place. I don't care what you say. How did you get there? Do you have to, is it extreme sacrifice? Like, how do you get there?
Yes, and I would say at an early age, it's interesting is some words you used at the beginning, but my mom would have described me, she said, it was just in your DNA. She's like, grit and perseverance. I wouldn't say I've always been patient, and that's probably where it's gotten me, you know, a few times in the ankles. But, you know, at an early age, I remember, you know, it was like, okay, I'm going to teach myself music. There was not a local newspaper, and I decided that there needed to be one. So, you know, there were issues that were happening in the neighborhood. So I started a newspaper. Decided I had a love for music. Went on to be
and parents weren't
DJ.
pushing this.
No, if anything, my mom tells a very funny story. She said, you know, there was one day where I came up, all you kids had gone into the other room, and I got a little worried because it got very quiet, and I thought, did they leave the house? You know, and so I had that moment of panic. And so she said, I walked in and she said, there you were walking around the room. You had an assembly line. Apparently I had assembled all the kids from the neighborhood. And it was like, okay, you draw this, you write this section, you do this, you put it together. She's like, and then you were back there binding it at the very end.
That reminds me of like the actual Disney movie, right? Like when he started. So rare to have that skill set and that drive at that age.
I think I was fascinated just by the whole process of, for me, it's also about collaboration. You know, I'm big on teamwork. You know, I hope that I'm inspiring to my folks that I work with, but I truly believe in a collective, and I played team sports all through high school, soccer all the time, state level, all state, regional, helped start the SMU soccer team back in the day. So for me, I think that's where, you know, all that got infused as far as a team effort. But as much as it's a team effort, you have to be willing to sacrifice yourself. You have to put yourself, and I've always had the roll up your sleeves mentality. Part of that is not just hard work. For me, it is also understanding if I don't roll up my sleeves and actually get tactile with it myself, then I feel a little disconnected from it, right? And that doesn't mean at the level I'm at now, micromanaging. That is not what it is. It means I've had that experience. I want to be able to understand it so that when somebody does come to me and say, it's either changed from what you know, or I need this, or I can help the organization and try and grow, and I can help that person.
You've got a little bit of understanding of where they are and what they're doing. And
so I would say, going back to your question about my trajectory, if you will, literally some people might say, wow, your career looks like ADD. And I had an old a boss who used to tease me about this. She's like, I just don't understand. You go over here and then you go over here. So I started on air and radio, left, eventually went into advertising. Pepsi was actually my first job. Learned the brand side, on the agency side, went into film, because I always knew I wanted to be in LA. I knew I wanted to be in the entertainment business. I was undecided between film and television, and loved the film, and then decided, you know what, I want to do TV, because I always said, I'm not sure. So I just picked up, went over to E.
Bold move, right?
Yes,
Because
a lot of people are like, what are you doing? People kill themselves to get into film. And I said, yeah, I get it, but like, I want to understand this. And part of it is when the E Online was also formulating, I could somehow sense where content was going and all the different influences. And I loved the ability of TV, at that point, always on, sort of, evergreen. And so I had that great experience. I always had this music thing, just always. So I was presented with an opportunity to go be a part of an EDM startup. Dove right in, head first. Everybody went, what are you doing? So I've done a little bit, and now I've noticed that in partnerships, I guess the point is it's all come back together.
Sure.
Understanding all those businesses.
Kind of like those Marvel characters, right?
Yeah.
But it does, and those are hard things to do, because when you jump off those docks, right, you don't know if you're making a mistake.
Oh yeah, and there were plenty of times where I leapt in and went, what have I done?
Sure.
You do that gasp.
But it always
and there
works
were
out.
even, yeah, it did, right? But I would be a liar to say that there weren't moments where, while I was in it, I was going, what have I done? What have I done? And then, whether you look at it as course corrected or the next chapter, when I got to the next chapter, I went, and the pieces just sort of clicked. And I, whether that was a chosen path or just my path, I don't know.
So what advice would you give to those out there? There's people that ask us every day, hey, how do I get motivated? How do I push through my mistake? What little tidbits from all that experience would you give folks?
Don't live in shame, move on, right? That's a lot of things, whether that's personal or even at work. Don't just do it for the accreditation. Do it because you love it, which sounds, does that sound trite or just sound, it's not a line. You really do have to love it. Where I'm at right now, not easy hours. You're working on, the luxury is you're working on some of the greatest IP in the world. And it's fun content. There's a very high bar.
Sure.
And a lot of work that goes with it. So you have to be passionate, not just about your subject matter, but you have to be passionate for yourself. And if it's not working, then admit that to yourself and course correct, I guess.
We tell people, sorry to interrupt, tell people you got to know your true north, right? You got to know what you're passionate about, because if not, you're not necessarily waking up and full of energy and excited about what you're doing, and then it's a fight.
It is.
But it's hard to find what you love.
I completely agree with that as well. Yeah, and then sometimes what you love evolves, right? And I think maybe that's where, whether I have failed upwards or however you want to look at it, for me, I have, what is that true north? I'm I've followed my passion points, and so far, knock on wood, they've worked out, where I've gone, right now, this is what I want to do.
I want to do music.
And
Right.
And it wasn't just music. It was, I wanted to be a part of a startup. I loved the opportunity to be able to fix. So you have to know yourself in the sense of what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. And it doesn't mean that you avoid your weaknesses. You may need to grow them in order to be your true successful self. And there were things that I didn't know, and I went, well, fine, I'm going to go push myself to go learn them. Personally, I have a little boy who's 5.
Awesome.
I am about to get married, and it will be...
Congrats.
Thank you. So between the two of us,
Yeah.
we will have 3 boys.
Nice.
Holy cow.
Jumping
5'8", 5'8", and 11.
Yeah.
And, that's a whole nother series of challenges. But, and people who have kids will say this. One thing that I've learned, it taught me how to get out of my own way. And that's helped me personally as well as professionally. And at the end of the day, making sure that I am the best version of myself to motivate these guys as well.
You're lucky. I mean, it's very rare to find to do what you love. It's very rare to achieve the success that you've achieved, to have a healthy, and you're getting married.
I waited a long time to do that. It's my first, and but I found the right one. Boom.
Good work.
Thank you.
Anything I missed?
One thing that seemed to resonate, I don't know if this is helpful, another takeaway, no matter what side of the business you're on, but something that served me well for partnerships you can't talk at people. And I think that's also how you need to go about life.
Yeah, because the business partnerships you're forming are very similar to personal partnerships that people form, right?
So it has to be a two-way street, and there are always going to be bumps on the road, and just acknowledge at the beginning that there's going to be bumps on the road. And I always tell my partners at the beginning, very first call out of the gate, I go, we're going to hit a few bumps, and that's when we need to join heads, just lock arms, and plow right through it, and that's how we'll get through it. And every time it served me really, really well, because the partners are like, oh my God, we're at that moment. I'm like, what are we going to do? And so I don't know if that's a helpful takeaway, but I find that no matter what meeting is, people are always talking at each other because they're so busy pushing their agenda as opposed to absorbing what they maybe should hear and how they might be able to help themselves as well as the other person achieve something.
And it sounds like the perfect lesson for your upcoming marriage.
Right. It's why I think I'm actually finally getting married. Finally, I learned the lesson, maybe.
Right.
So anyway,
awesome.
Thank you, bud.
Stuff.
Thank you so much.
All right, jump.
My new superhero. Well, I feel like I have superhuman powers. Marvel comic universe. I didn't even know that was like a thing. I mean, that's like my reality. That's the reality that I live in. I see like. The trees are alive. The superheroes come by.
You're in the real world, right?
No, I mean that's like. I'm glad there's a term for it. Who knew, Joe? Like,
so when you walk through the woods, you actually see superheroes like that snail is Super Snail.
Yeah, don't you?
No.
Well,
like Mr. Rock.
I'm the superhero in my story.
Oh, very nice.
You're the superhero in a lot of people's stories.
Let's start with Marvel, and then we're going to go to Mindy and her story, which is a pretty incredible story in itself. I love that you sort of set it up at the start that she is a superhero within Marvel. But Marvel, 8,000 characters. Right now, one of the biggest movies out there this year is Black Panther. Huge blockbuster. And, if I had to name, I think she said, she couldn't name 100 of their characters, and there's 8,000. What a huge enterprise.
It's going to be going on for decades.
You guys have never been to Comic-Con, or?
I have been to
Comic-Con. One time in Miami.
Incredible.
I'm not a comic guy, so I never read comics as a kid, so I don't.
But that seems the thing about this. You mentioned before that, like, who would have thought back in the days of Marvel being comics that it you don't have to be a comic person anymore to know all these massive names that are out there. It's just
Archie and Veronica.
Well, they're graphic novels, aren't they?
I think
we're
those
them
are
comics, but I think
pornography.
Graphic novels is the right term, is it not?
It is, but Marvel now, obviously, as a studio, is huge. And she talked about the partnerships and about who doesn't want to partner with them now. I mean, there's so many very valuable intellectual property.
How do you think it ties into the whole Spartan ethos and what we try to teach here? Do you think those characters then become inspirational to get people?
Oh, sure. You're creating characters. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, like the Hunter McIntyres of the world now, right? I mean, like now I meet people, like little kids on the street, and those are their superheroes. They're like real life superheroes. And there's nothing more inspirational than that. No, you create a forum that's like a gladiator's arena.
Yeah,
and
I'm sorry.
No, I mean the whole reason why people loved Marvel back in the day before we had all this technology, and I don't even know how to play a video game, but is like that escapism into, it was like when that movie came out that had the tree with the Avatar. People were like crying because they can't live in Avatar, and I'm sitting there going like, have you walked in the woods? Because it really is Avatar, right? And the same thing with a Spartan race. It really is a superhero's kingdom because these people can do incredible feats. Staying up for 60 hours carrying trees up mountains, like that's a superhero. So come join the party.
And speaking of superheroes, I want to talk a little bit about Mindy herself. And, the idea, here's a lady, she's been a single mom, has a 5-year-old, is getting married, is the senior vice president of global partnerships. As she says, they've created a one-stop shop, so you don't have to ping-pong between departments. So she has a massive responsibility.
And super nice.
Yeah.
Right? You just think somebody at that level, right? She's just nice.
Yeah. And I loved when she talked about...
She didn't yell at anybody to stop making noise.
Oh, that...
She didn't do that.
No, but when you're the hero in your own story, you can tell the restaurant to stop making food while you do an interview.
The restaurant staff that's working to be quiet.
That was great. That was great. But Mindy, she talked about her path, and she started. I'm trying to think what the order was, but how she went from having her own newspaper into working in radio, into movies, into television, into being the director of an EDM. I don't think she said festival, but a label or something. But and she said, looking from the outside, it would seem like it was very scattered and sort of attention deficit. But what she said tied it all together was that she was always following things that she was passionate about, and that it had the same general theme. And she said, and then later on, when it was like somebody pulled a string, it all came together, it made sense. And that it wasn't just shotgun.
I think that's something for the audience to grab, right? Number one, make sure you're always doing something. You don't want to sit idle, right?
Whatever you do something.
And then try to be doing something that you're passionate about.
Well, yeah, or yes. But I think what you're saying is, the way I took it is, she was working for a purpose. Yep. Right? So she talked about being a child and being the neighborhood coordinator, right? Or maybe it was her brothers and sisters, but she lined them all up.
Oh, the newspaper thing.
Right, and she gave them jobs. So clearly she was, even from a young age, she was the alpha. She was in charge, right? Yeah. But she took all these other jobs, more, like anybody else, entry position or staff type of jobs, but they were all leading her to that final job. I don't know if that's her final job. I shouldn't say that, to where she is now, right? So it was a purpose. She was learning bits and pieces that she was going to all then
Our
put
hindsight's
together.
always 20/20, right? I mean, when you can retrospectively look back at something, you can kind of weave
I think even if she didn't know what was in front of her, she kind of intuitively knew the right way to go. And I take some of this. That's good. I've built on this. I've learned from this experience. I will now hop over here and make myself
your own
the
luck.
hero's
you make
journey.
your own luck in many cases. You make your own opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Well, another cool way that she put
Maybe.
that too, though, is she said, "Don't dwell on shame and regret. Deal with it, press on, and what's next." And a good friend of ours, Rob Barger, a little while ago gave me a patch for my backpack, and it says, "So what? Now what?" And I love that, right? So what? Now what?
That's a good point.
And so even when you fail, even when you stumble, even when you've got egg on your face, you can get really bogged down that, or you can say, hey, what's next? And I love that she talked about that there's always a next step. Don't dwell in shame and regret and everything else. Just press on, deal with it, and do what needs to be done.
That's a...
like the Hulk doesn't sit there and cry about things he's done,
Matter of
right?
fact, I don't think, is there any superhero that sits around and cries?
No, I think that would be a villain.
Actually, Joe, that's number 7,996. We'll find out in about 26
But
years.
superhero power. Move this back, because I wanted to ask
dismality.
this earlier when we were talking about kids, though. It would be interesting to find out how many Spartans out there were children who read comics, I would think a lot of them, but who wanted to be the superhero. Sure. And Spartan provides them.
That's interesting.
Yeah, when you jump
path,
over that
right?
fire and you get your picture coming through the arch,
Right. What are you
every
trying?
one of
You're
those people
trying
is
to
a
be that
superhero.
superhero, right?
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
their
are you
Facebook
not?
profile
Well,
picture.
You've seen we actually have people show up in costume.
Who would you ask that, no, I don't want to be a superhero? What would you? But then I think a better question is, what would your superpower
They
be?
don't get into that. There's always either speed or invisibility.
Mine would
If you want to find out what, hold on, because we want to get them to come to the web, the website
Watch
to see
the
that.
movie Fern Gully. See Krista. That's a good. Or Magic.
If you want to
That's a
find
good
out Sephra's superpower, come to Spartan.com/podcast. Follow our podcast on YouTube, on iTunes. Subscribe so you'll never miss another one again. And we do not have 8,000 characters, but we've got a bunch.
Talk
We
to you
got
soon.
5 million.
Toodles.
Thank you for watching another epic story of success. If you like our message, please share Spartan Up with your friends and subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you catch our show, maybe in the woods. Spartan Up is brought to you by Spartan Race. To find a race near you, visit Spartan.com.